Hey everyone, and welcome to the latest Eagle Eye with Reuben Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro. Reuben, we have some news to talk about. We can always use some news in May.
Yeah, a little roster move. We like roster moves. Roster moves keep us on our toes.
They do. The Eagles are signing Ryan Kerrigan. You've already heard it. This didn't quite reach the bar of an emergency podcast. I had some people ask me, we have to be selective here. We can't just be throwing out emergency pods whenever we feel like it.
Yeah, because they would lose their value, I think, if we did that. But I do think if we didn't have one today, we probably would have done one. Like if it happened like on a Friday morning and we didn't have a pod till Tuesday, we probably would have done a pod. But since we had one coming up the next day. So you kind of have to balance all those things in and determining when and when not to do an emergency pod. But yeah, I think if we do too many of them, though, they'll kind of lose their value. I don't know what
Yeah.
that means, but it sounds
Yeah, and
good.
these pods are so valuable to begin with. We wouldn't want to do that. Thanks as always for everyone for listening. We're going to talk about Ryan Kerrigan, a little bit of the offseason workout plan and what's been happening with the Eagles. Rookie camp happened at the end of last week. There are some Eagle free agents who are still available. We'll get into some of those names and if it would make sense for the Birds to bring them back. And we'll bring on our good buddy JP Finlay from NBC Sports Washington, who covers the Washington football team and has been around Ryan Kerrigan for a long time. So we'll get his take on the move. But let's just jump into what we first thought of, our first impressions when we hear Ryan Kerrigan coming to the Eagles.
Yeah, my initial impression was first it was wow, he's still available, which surprised me. I mean, I knew nobody had signed him, but it's just kind of wow, Ryan Kerrigan, and just the fact that I think of two things when I think of Ryan Kerrigan. I think of consistency and durability, and the guy never misses games. He's had 5.5 sacks every year of his career, and 5.5 isn't, it's not going to get you to the Pro Bowl, but he can still play. And I don't know how much they're going to use him because you still have BG and Sweat and Barnett. So I don't think he's going to be starting. I don't think he's going to be playing 50 snaps a game, but at his age, that's probably best. My first reaction was this is a guy who can help this team, and it's a good move. And sounds like they didn't really pay. We don't have the real numbers yet. We have the agent numbers, which include, up to could be worth as much as, including all the incentives. But it sounds like it's like a $3 million base or, so we'll get the numbers soon. But manageable number for a guy who's really good player. I like the move. There's nothing not to like about it.
Yeah, the numbers we've heard from, I think it was from NFL Network, up to $3.5 million. You're right, that includes whatever incentives or whatever else. But even if it ends up being 3.5 million, that's not bad for a third pass rusher. And I guess the one, not the downside, but the one thing I have heard is, well, how does this kind of jive with the rebuild or the retool or whatever you want to call it? But I mean, they want to be competitive. They don't want to just tank this year. They want to try to win games, and it's a 1-year deal. So it's not like they're not tanking a lot of money in this older guy. They're saying for 1 year, you come here and play. And he's kind of a culture setter, that we've heard so much about Sirianni and culture. The one thing I thought about was that Lane Johnson quote about Kerrigan from a few years ago when we asked him what it's like to play Ryan Kerrigan. He said it sucks because the guy doesn't stop. He reminds me of BG in that way. Just he takes every snap seriously. He doesn't take plays off. And I think that matters. And I think that matters for what Nick Sirianni wants, because he wants guys who are competitive. He wants guys who are going to go hard, first whistle, last whistle in practice and games. And that's Ryan Kerrigan. He's always been that. I mean, it's amazing his career. He's been the model of consistency. He plays 16 games just about every year. He always has good sack numbers. He's played the NFC East incredibly well. He has at least 13 sacks against all three of his NFC East opponents. I mean, he's not the same guy he once was. He's not a Pro Bowler anymore, but I think he can help them.
Yeah, and you never know with an older guy because at some point he's going to take that big, step backwards. But it certainly doesn't seem like he's at that point yet. I mean, to get 5.5 sacks, 20 snaps a game, 25 snaps a game is good production. Yeah, he's the kind of guy. And I think as far as the youth movement, what you don't want is to pay Alshon Jeffrey $30 million in the middle of a youth movement. That I don't have a problem with paying a guy $3 million on a one-year deal who actually is going to be a benefit to the young guys who are around him. The young guys on the defense are going to learn a lot from Ryan Kerrigan. I think a youth movement, you need those guys. You need those older guys who can set the tone and lead by example and show the young guys what it's like to be a pro. So the whole key to a youth movement is that you're not allocating resources on older guys, and they're not doing that. They didn't have to trade anything to get them. They didn't have to give up a draft pick, and they're not paying them. They're paying them a few $1 million. So to me, a youth movement, the whole essence of a youth movement is that you're not paying older guys huge contracts on long-term deals. And this is nothing like that.
Yeah. And all these contracts they've given guys this year have been 1-year deals. And that means that, yeah, they're trying to win this year, but they're not going to tie themselves to anyone. And in this year, especially, it makes sense for the players too, because there's a lot more money coming in the following season. So take a 1-year deal, prove you can still play, do it for an up and coming team, you hope, and then see where the next year brings you. It's hard to look at this Kerrigan move and not think about Chris Long. I mean, it's just 32-year-old pass rusher, former first-round pick, had a really long career, in the twilight of his career, but can probably still offer you something. I guess a little similar to Michael Bennett, even though Bennett was a trade, but bringing in a veteran guy. And it does show you that under Gannon, they haven't changed their organizational philosophy about stocking the line. I mean, they keep stocking. They drafted 2 defensive tackles. They just signed a veteran to add to a group that was already 3 deep. So that is going to continue with this team. And that kind of signals that as well.
Yeah. And just to kind of recap Kerrigan's career, first round pick in 2011, 16th overall, out of Purdue, Indiana native, 7.5 sacks his first year as a full-time starter, 8.5, 8.5, 13.5, 9.5, 11, 13, 13, 5.5, 5.5, 95.5 career sacks in 10 years. So he's averaged 10 sacks a year, 4 Pro Bowls, 2012, and then 3 in a row in 16, 17, and 18. So he's never been on a good team, really. I mean, he's been on a couple playoff teams, I guess, 2011, 2014, and then obviously last year, but has never won a playoff game. So it's interesting from that aspect. He's never walked off the field after a playoff victory. So I'm sure he would. I'm not sure this is the place to come to do that, to check that box, but he's an intriguing signing, and I like the Chris Long. I like the Chris Long comparison better than the Michael Bennett one, just because I think, and I like Michael Bennett, and I think he was a talented guy, but I'm not sure organizationally he's a guy that you want around all your young impressionable players. I'm trying to say that nicely.
There's really like no, I get what you're saying. There's and personality wise, I mean, you have Kerrigan here, then you have Chris Long, and then way off in the distance, you have Michael Bennett, who I really like. I enjoyed being around him, but you never knew exactly what was going to happen with him.
Yeah, I like being around him, but I wouldn't want him to be around my team, if that makes sense, my young players. But yeah, it's like a Chris Longish move, similar points in their career. And Chris Long really helped this team for a couple of years. So maybe in a couple of years, we'll be listening to Michael Kerrigan's podcast every day.
You just made Michael Bennett and Ryan Kerrigan.
Ryan Kerrigan's, what did I say? Ryan Kerrigan's podcast every day. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't get the loquacious vibes from Kerrigan like I do from
No, he doesn't say much. He's a quiet guy, but yeah. But what you said is really interesting. Because I don't think the D line was bad coming into the offseason. I mean, they returned, some good edge rushers and I mean, they returned their starting defensive tackles, but I mean, they brought back Ridgeway and they drafted a couple guys, interior guys. They now signed an edge rusher. So the D line is pretty loaded.
Yeah, and they drafted an edge rusher. It came late.
Yeah.
In the 6th round with Teron Jackson. I actually thought edge rusher was a position they might go early, day 1 or day 2 even.
Yeah. Well, there were some guys out there who, I mean, I was convinced they were going to draft Kwity Paye, but that didn't come to fruition. But yeah, I mean, there were some names that made sense for them. But I mean, they just, they're paying Derek Barnett $10 million. So they're really banking on him making that jump to, from 6-7 sacks to 12 sacks. And, we'll see if he can do it. I think that's really the key question on the D line.
Yeah. And I think we're going to see a rotation still, every team rotates in some fashion on the D line, but I think we're still going to see a pretty heavy rotation. I mean, that's what we've seen that from the teams Gannon's been on before. So I'd expect that to continue. And signing a guy like Ryan Kerrigan, you're not signing him to play 15% of the snaps. I mean, I think you want him to get to 35, 40% of the snaps.
Yeah, I think 25 to 30 snaps. I mean, it'll be interesting. I think also with the
I was saying percent.
Yeah. No, I understand.
Okay.
I think with a 17-game season, I mean, it's only 1 game longer, but that's a long season. And I do think we'll see teams rotating guys more and playing more guys and going deeper. So there's nothing wrong with having 4 guys that can get to the quarterback.
Yeah.
Keep firing fastballs, Dave.
Got to fire those fastballs. There you go. The old Andy Reid, Jim Johnston cliche. All right, let's find out about Ryan Kerrigan from someone who knows him a little bit better than us. Joining us now on the Eagle Eye podcast, our DC correspondent, JP Finlay from NBC Sports Washington. JP, how you doing, man?
I'm good, man. Thank you guys for having me.
It makes it sound like you're on our staff as our Washington reporter.
I always say that to Dave, so it's only fair if he says it back to me. It's an unpaid position, is what I understand.
I work really hard in my position for you guys, so I'm going to make you work hard here. This is fun. We wanted to talk to you because obviously Ryan Kerrigan signs with the Eagles after a really impressive career down there in Washington. Let's just start off with the biggest question I think Eagles fans want to know. How much does this guy have left?
I think he could have a double-digit sack season left. I really do. He takes elite care of his body. I think he finished last year with 5.5 sacks, and he was not playing much. Yeah, he really didn't get much usage. He did get a couple games where Chase Young was out, but I think he wants to prove he still has it. It's going to be about opportunity. And I'd almost ask you guys, how much opportunity is he going to get, especially in clear passing situations? Because he wasn't getting that. And he's a brute force strength guy. I think he's going to be I know he said he won't be, but I think he'll be particularly motivated against the Washington football team. He gets to play them twice. It all depends on opportunity. If you look at his sack per snap rate last season, I mean, it was among the tops in the NFL, especially in the first half of the year. He's still a good player. He's a super hard worker. I wouldn't put much past him. If he got 5.5 last year where he wasn't getting much work, if his usage improves a little bit, I think 7.5 seems totally reasonable. I'd actually be curious if like Vegas gave an over under on that. I'd be very curious where it would end up.
I heard 6. I don't know.
I might take the over on 6.
How did he react? I mean, here's a guy who's been a starter for a decade at a high level, productive player. How did he respond to, I mean, I saw he played more special team snaps than he's ever played, which is, really unusual for a guy his age and background. How did he react to the whole, not being a starter, being a situational guy? I think he averaged about 23, 24 snaps a game on defense and playing special teams for the first time, at least to that extent.
Yeah, and some of that average was driven up by a couple games Chase missed to injury, because there were a lot of games where I feel like he got fewer than double digits on the defensive side of the ball anyway. He was a pro. He was cool about it the whole time. The first time we talked to him after the draft may have been like training camp because of COVID and everything. And he said, listen, second overall pick, Chase Young's the pick. They did the right thing. There's nothing, I have nothing to say about that. The guy's a star. Of course, the organization drafted him. I think he would have loved to have more of a role going forward. When he said he wanted to stay in DC, I think he's telling the truth. A lot of people have said that and not meant it. Like Kirk Cousins said it for 2 years. Everybody knew he wanted to leave, but he kept saying he wanted to stay. Ryan wanted to stay. It was my understanding that he was never in the cards for them. Ron Rivera has completely flipped this organization over. There is barely anybody with ties to the Bruce Allen, Jay Gruden era. I mean, down to like secretaries and salespeople. They have flipped things around. And one thing that says a lot to me is how Chase Young talked about Kerrigan, even though Kerrigan knew he's kind of training his replacement, but he said they would have breakfast together all the time at the facility, and Kerrigan would show him kind of his study habits, his eating habits, all of these things. And those two had a really tight bond. And I think every coach I've ever talked to, every player I've ever talked to, they all love Kerrigan. And, he grew up in DC. He was drafted here, young guy, eventually, got engaged, got married, now has a baby. And I think he's just at a different stage of kind of his life. But he was never a malcontent. I imagine privately there's some frustration, especially when you're producing. Early in the season, he was getting like a sack a game, and he just wasn't getting on the field. I'm sure one of the big reasons he's going to Philly is so he thinks he can play.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard, and he's like, Kerrigan's one of those guys that he played for a division rival for so long, but there was never like hatred. I always got kind of a feeling of mutual respect between him and Lane Johnson and really everyone who he's faced in his time there. I wanted to talk to you about his competitiveness, because that's the one thing new Eagles head coach Nick Sirianni always says, is that he wants guys who are going to compete, and he's kind of trying to build a culture around that here. From everything I've heard, it seems like Kerrigan's going to fit into that pretty well. Is that your sense of it too?
Definitely. Do we know if Kerrigan and Nick Sirianni played rock, paper, scissors during the recruitment process?
I hope so.
Me too. I don't think there's any question he'll compete every snap, every rep in practice. I think especially now he's never been like a chip on his shoulder guy. And one thing I like about him is that he's never been inauthentic to try to like play up stuff to the media or the fans or any of that. He's always been himself, kind of even keeled, low key, but he's a hyper competitive dude. I think it aided him that he wasn't on the field. I think he wants to be on the field. And do we have contract details yet? I assume this is a 1-year deal.
Yeah.
This is a 1 year. We don't know the financials yet.
Ryan's also a smart guy. I think he's going to want to produce and be looking for another deal in 2022 when the cap goes way up. So I don't think there's any motivational competitive questions whatsoever.
I wanted to ask you about the Eagles have been so decimated by injuries, and Kerrigan, I guess, missed the 4 games 2 years ago, but he's never missed a game any other season in his career. Is that something that, I mean, that really stands out to me, since like there's nobody on this team that's ever played 16 games. I mean, I don't think they had anybody play more than 5 games last year, but what goes into that? And I mean, what does that say about his conditioning, his workout regimen, all that kind of stuff, and the pride he has and all that?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on up there. Ronald Darby came down here, played a full season, no problem. He takes exceptional care of his body. I mean, maybe you guys have interacted with him in post games or something all the time the Skins play the Eagles, but he's huge. I mean, everything is complete muscle. He truly takes care of his body like a veteran. I would have zero durability questions. I realize I'm painting this like incredibly rosy picture, but I think the Eagles got a steal here. He's not the player he was. I wouldn't expect 13 sacks, and maybe my double-digit sacks is a little rose-colored glasses just because it's a person I like a lot.
It's too late. We're not going to let you back out of that.
I can see the quote graphic already on Instagram, but I just think he's. I mean, when you get to a May signing, right? It's typically a veteran that he's waiting for the right opportunity. Teams are waiting to get that salary down lower. I think as far as a May signing goes, like last week, the Washington football team signed Charles Leno, a tackle from the Bears. And it was a perfect signing for them because everybody has realistic expectations. You're not getting Selma Hayek at her peak, but you're still getting Selma Hayek. And I think you're not getting Ryan Kerrigan in 2017, but you're still getting a really good version of Ryan Kerrigan. And I think he'll be ready to go.
It's interesting because we're trying to figure out the Eagles' new defense. And they have a new defensive coordinator, and we think he's going to run a 4-3, but we also think there's a chance we could see some odd fronts and maybe some stand-up rushers. Kerrigan, he's done both as far as I know. Where do you think he fits into that picture? I mean, could he do both here? Is he maybe at this point in his career more of a stand-up rusher type player? Like, what do you think he could do as far as that goes in Philly?
I think because of his strength, you'd still want him firing up at a tackle rather than, to me, the stand-up role is best for like guys with a lot of speed off the edge. And I don't know that would be his strength, but listen, in Washington, I wonder what his sack totals would look like if they weren't in a ill-suited 3-4 for the bulk of his career, where he's playing an outside linebacker role rather than just kind of more of a traditional pass rusher. You're not going to want him in coverage. It's not. I mean, how many times you guys see Zach Ertz run past him over the last decade? But I think he's best traditionally out of a 3-point stance, but he'll be willing to do whatever asked of him. I certainly believe that, and I imagine at this point, I think the interest from the Steelers was real. I imagine he asked some questions too of how he's going to be used, and he got to be comfortable with how he'd use the role.
Yeah, I have to think. I mean, 17-game season. Eagles' best pass rusher is Brandon Graham, who's Dave. What is he? 33, and Ryan Kerrigan is 33, or also. But and then they have Barnett and Sweat. But I think teams, anytime you can get decent depth in a 17-game season at a position where you're older, it just makes a lot of sense. I was going to ask you if there's anything we should know about him that's not football related, like something that's striking about him as far as just something off the field, interesting about him that you've learned over the years. You mentioned he has a baby. What's he all about non-football wise?
He's a big hoops fan. I think he loves the Indiana Pacers. He grew up in Indiana. We'll see how Sixers fans deal with that.
They're not going to deal with it well.
What's that?
They're not going to deal with it well, especially if they end up playing each other in the playoffs.
Well, he became a pretty big Caps fan being here, and I can only imagine how that will go with the Flyers crowd. I think he's a Reds fan. I could be wrong on that, but I don't think he adopted the Nationals. I think
I Reese will like him then.
There you go.
Yeah, big Reds guy.
He's low key. He's funny and really smart, but he's on camera with the microphone in front of him. He keeps it pretty clean and generic, which I think has been a strategic thing for him, especially in a Washington locker room that's been an absolute roller coaster / train wreck at times, to just be the steady guy in the corner that's not causing trouble because so many other people are causing trouble. But I mean, everybody loves the guy, and he's just shows up, does his work, gets out of there, goes home now to wife and daughter. And that's what I'd expect in Philly.
He's actually
I wonder if he's going to move his family up there or what, because they do love this area. And it's only a 1-year deal. And, hell, he just signed, so he's probably not there for OTAs. So it'll be interesting to see that.
I just remembered isn't he from Indiana? Is he from Muncie?
He's from Muncie, Indiana, I believe. Yeah. Played his college ball at Purdue.
Yeah, so he's allowed to be a Pacers fan, I guess.
Right. It's natural. His wife, though, is from Southern California, so I think they now make Southern California home.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if you can do that.
Yeah, I want to bounce something off you here. I did a look at my top 10 Washington football team players that became Eagles. So I didn't go the other way. I went, they had to go from Washington to Philly up 95, not down 95. Tell me who I'm missing. I think I covered all these guys, but one, Riley McKenzie, Art Monk. By the way, Art Monk, my teammate in White Plains High School track team.
That's awesome.
Mark Reuben, Art Monk, Barry
Reuben
Wilburn.
went to Philly?
What's that?
I didn't remember Reuben going to the Eagles.
Oh yeah, he actually when Ty Detmer got benched in that '96 wildcard game at Candlestick, Ray Rhodes put Reuben in.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that was '96, and I think he went like 5 for 12 with a pick six. But yeah, he played in 2 games as an Eagle. But he's a Super Bowl MVP, so I had to mention him. Sure. Barry Wilburn, Mr. Personality right there. Brian Mitchell, Norm Snead, Sean Barber, love Sean Barber, Kurt Gouveia. Don't love Kurt Gouveia. David Akers, who played in 1 game for Washington, missed 2 field goals, got cut, and James Thrash. So that's my top 10.
You got it, I think. I mean, Trotter came this way, Sonny came this way.
Yeah.
I mean, Deshaun back and forth, right?
Yeah, and Trotter too.
So I worked with B-Mitch, and we were on the radio when this news came out, and it was interesting to kind of get his perspective on it. And who knows, Ryan and Brian are very different people, but B-Mitch was like, I absolutely wanted to hand it to Washington twice a year, and that was a huge part of it. And I think deep down, that's got to be a little part of it for Kerrigan. And I think he legitimately loves the organization and everything it's done for his life and his career, but I think he wants to show him he's got something left.
Yeah, I think that's human nature, right? Like, I think anyone would want to do that. And we'll see what happens. We appreciate it, man. It's always good to hear from you.
Absolutely. I have a Barry Wellborn story for if we're ever all in the same room holding alcoholic beverages. Certainly not for a podcast.
Yeah. I will hold you to that, my friend. Thank you.
Not one of my favorite
Finlay.
guys. I'm him and Gouveia. I won't hesitate to say not my 2 favorite guys I've ever covered.
So I didn't cover. This was years later, but yes, I
gotcha. Don't be Mitch. I said, hey,
will do.
All right, you can follow JP on Twitter at JP Finlay, FINLAY NBCS. JP, thanks as always, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Oh, real quick, Dave, say my last name, please.
Isn't it Finlay?
You're my legitimate friend. We've been doing this together 7-8 years.
Am I wrong?
Like it's Finlay. It's
Finlay.
just
It's Finlay. Well, then why is it spelled with an A?
It's not up to me. Ask the people at Ellis Island or something. I don't know.
Finlay. Thank you to JP Finlay, my close and personal friend.
Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Man, I feel bad about JP's name. I've known JP for a really long time, but we got to the point in our friendship that I realized I'd never really heard someone say his last name out loud, and I couldn't ask. Like, I've known JP for like 10 years. I couldn't be like, oh yeah, by the way, how do you pronounce your last name?
Well, you could have listened to his podcast and for the first 10 seconds and hear how he referred to himself. Even
so I do radio with them quite a bit in DC. He's on with Brian Mitchell, and it's just JP and B Mitch. That's what they call the show. So I don't even hear his last name there. But yeah, sorry, JP. That was good stuff, though. That's kind of what I thought about Ryan Kerrigan, that everyone who's been around him just thinks really highly of him. I've never heard anyone say a bad word about him.
And he thinks he's got a lot left. And he's a guy that has seen every game he's played over his 10-year career. So that's, his word carries a lot of weight with me. I mean, he really thinks he's got a lot left. The double digits is, that's a little out there, but
he walked it back.
He did walk it back a little bit, but even if he can get, and it's not all about the sacks, it's about the pressure. But he thinks he's got enough left to really make an impact. So that's good to hear.
That is. It is May. We're recording this on May 18th. The Eagles are right now in what they call phase 2 of the offseason, not quite to the point where they would have OTAs. And it's a weird year because last year there were no OTAs, there were no spring practices because of COVID. This year, the NFL scheduled them, and then a bunch of teams put out statements through the NFLPA saying, "Hey, we're not showing up." The Eagles are one of those teams, but apparently, it sounds like some veterans are showing up, and it looks like it's not going to be a lot of on-field stuff, but more in the classroom, which is really important, I think, for the Eagles. They have new offensive and defensive schemes this year.
Yeah, and we don't know who's going to be there and who's not, but phase 2, which goes from technically from Monday to Friday, but they can be on the field with their coaches, but it has to be at teaching pace, which means they're not practicing, but they can walk through plays. The coaches can walk them through technique things. And I mean, it was described to me as a meeting on the field. And so, I mean, the whole reason, it's weird. I mean, the PA made such a big deal, and then a guy gets hurt, and because he didn't go to the facility, and he's out, and he's out $15 million because his injury occurred when he was working out away from the facility. And I think that kind of thing is going to make players think twice about not coming to the facility.
I guess, but players work out in the off season.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, but I mean, there's a lot of players that'll go to the facility whenever they can, because it's just, I mean, you want to be in that environment. I mean, we'll see how it progresses, and we don't know the number of veterans that are going to be there, but it's a good sign that some are going to be there, because I mean, the whole point of the PA's protest was I mean, as I understand it, it was COVID related, really. I mean, it was just, they didn't want to, but I mean, walking through plays outside, I mean, I think we all understand now that the risk, and most of these guys are vaccinated, I think the risk of walking through plays outside on a practice field, your risk of getting COVID is pretty minimal, especially if you're vaccinated. And if you do, you're not going to show any symptoms. So it's good that they're going to be there. I don't really understand exactly. I mean, if you're going to make this much of a deal about putting out a statement and saying we stand in solidarity and all this, and then you're showing up because it's not an actual practice, or I don't really understand. I don't understand any of it. And we haven't had the chance to talk to anybody to get it clarified, but it's good that there's going to be guys there. I'm sure there'll be guys that aren't there. But the weird thing is, if they're going for the meetings, I mean, the meetings are still virtual, as I understand it, in phase 2. So the meetings are virtual. So the only reason to be in the facility would be on the field with your coach walking through plays.
Yeah. And I think that's important. I mean, spacing
Very important
on the field. And look, we've all been on Zooms for over a year. Sometimes you check out. It's a lot easier to check out. I mean, I'm watching you move. Your eyes are, you're not paying attention to me right now.
What's that?
It's just so easy to, I have a window right next to me, and if a bird flies through, I'm looking at the bird. I'm not worried about what John Gannon's telling me about this protection or whatever it is. I understand the importance of having in person, and it's not to sacrifice health, but I think there are reasonable ways of doing it. It looks like that's what's kind of prevailing here. It's some common sense, and the whole notion that these things are voluntary has always been a little laughable, because they're voluntary for some, really. I mean, Fletcher Cox doesn't want to show up. Fletcher Cox doesn't have to show up. But the thing I was worried about was, guys who are trying to make the team and trying to get an edge, were they going to feel pressured to not be there? Because normally they'd feel pressure to be there, right? You're trying to make the team and you're like, yeah, they're voluntary, but I'm the 5th defensive end and I'm trying to make this football team. I better be there. In this case, I was worried you'd have like the NFLPA kind of forcing it a little bit, and then guys who want to be there weren't going to. I was worried about that. It doesn't feel like that's going to be the case. And I think it makes sense. I think they'll be okay doing it the way they're doing it. One guy who won't be there, or at least who isn't there now, not much of a surprise, but Zach Ertz.
Yeah, Zach Ertz isn't there. And I mean, I keep hoping for some reconciliation, but it sure doesn't look like it's headed that way. Eagles haven't gotten an offer that suits them. He's just kind of in limbo. It's a weird story. It's It's strange because I mean the whole breakdown between the Eagles and Zach Ertz started when he asked for a contract that they didn't want to pay, and they weren't anywhere close to each other, and he felt disrespected. But then he went out and did not have a good year and did not play up to the level of the contract that he wanted. So you think there might be a sense of, we can make this work, but I guess the damage had already been done. I guess he just probably doesn't feel like he's a part of this, and obviously he hasn't been with the team at all during the offseason, so that's understandable. I don't know. I think at this point it's pretty clear that he won't be here. It'll be interesting.
He has talked to Nick Sirianni.
Yeah.
And I think Zach's a smart enough guy that he wouldn't like hold it against the new head coach, but I think everyone kind of understands the situation here.
I don't understand it because I don't understand. I mean, I think he can still play. I don't think he's going to have any 116 catch seasons again, but I think he could still help this team. I think Ertz and Goddard are a pretty good 1-2 punch at tight end. And, he's not going to cost you a whole lot more if you keep him than if you don't. You can, after June 1st, you can spread it out over 2 years, the dead money. But what I don't get is why they can't work this out. And if he loves it here so much that he's crying, talking about leaving and how maybe one day he can come back. He's already talking about coming back before he's even gone. So we know how much he loves the city. I mean, he's spent his whole career here. He loves it here. He's talked about that for years. How much this franchise meant to him. He caught a winning touchdown in a Super Bowl. He can still play. He's only 30. He's a character guy, a good guy in the locker room. So why can't they make it work? That's what I don't get.
Yeah, I just think the relationship has kind of run its course. I don't want to put words in his mouth. I think it'd be unfair, but I don't get the sense that he wants to be, not that he doesn't want to be here, but he doesn't want to be here in this situation with this team after what's transpired over the last year. And I don't want to say that point blank because I haven't talked to Zach. So, I don't know, but that's the sense that I kind of get from it. And look, the Eagles, for their part, I mean, Howie has not denied the fact that he's trying to trade Zach Ertz.
No.
I mean, in fact, he's almost made it seem like, hey, someone come give me an offer, when he's been asked about players before and possibly cutting them or trading them, he said, no, we want that player here. That player is a good player. He hasn't said that about Zach Ertz. No. He said he's a good player. He said he's meant a lot to this team. He hasn't said he wants him here. He hasn't said he expects him to be on the team. He doesn't. I mean, I think he's trying to trade Zach Ertz, and he just hasn't gotten an offer that he wants yet.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But, the other thing is if he does get cut, he's not going to make $8 million wherever he goes. I mean, if he stays here, he's going to get that $8 million. So, I mean, he's going to, and I think at this point, it's most likely they're going to have to cut him. I mean,
you never know. I mean, I think Howie's hope is that some team gets desperate.
How long? Yeah, I mean, and the other part of it, he's talked about how much respect he has for Zach and what he's meant to the franchise. So how late do you wait? At what point do you say, let's just give the guy a chance to go get a job somewhere? It's an interesting situation, but I mean, if he hits the street as a free agent, nobody's going to give him $8 million, and maybe he gets 5, maybe it's 4, I don't know, but leaving here is going to, I mean, if he said, hey, I thought about this, I want to come back, I want to play out the last year of my contract, I owe it to my team and my family and the franchise, and he gets $8 million, or they could still cut him, but
yeah, I don't know. I wonder if he were to say that, if the Eagles would say, okay, come back. I don't know. I've always gotten the sense from this that there's just too much on both sides.
It seems that way.
Yeah.
But I just don't see why, I guess is my thing. Like I've seen relationships between players and teams have fractures, and they talk it out. They sit down at a table and I mean, I've seen it 100 times where these kind of things happen, and well, we talked and we came to an. I mean, it happens, but for whatever reason, it's not. I mean, it's not happening. So, guess he's gone.
Yeah, that's still the way I think this is going to play out. Maybe it changes, and we'll see. The first mandatory camp isn't until June 8th through 10th, so we'll see if he's there for that. And then these guys are off until training camp, which begins either late July, early August, around then. So I don't know. It really is. It's become, once the other major storyline was removed, this has become kind of the thing hovering over the Eagles right now.
That was well done.
Yeah, I sidestepped that.
I think training camps will start in August because with 3 preseason games and a later start to the season, I would think it would start in August. But I don't know. We don't have those dates yet. But yeah, that was good. We don't have to change the signage.
Rookie camp was this previous weekend. Didn't get to see a lot of it. I wasn't even there. And it kills me too. I had something planned, so I wasn't there. I
didn't see much more than you did.
Good. That actually makes me feel better. But Nick Sirianni did speak, and we got to talk to a few rookies last Wednesday. I was around for that. Not a ton out of this, but we got to hear from Devontae Smith again, and Milton Williams and Landon Dickerson. It's good to hear from these guys and learn a little bit more about them as we dive deeper. Anything from the weekend, from either a press conference or on field, that sticks out to you?
Well, there's a couple of things. I mean, it was good to see Landon Dickerson out there. Had a brace on his knee, but he was in uniform. He was at practice. We learned later that he wasn't really participating. I mean, he was doing walkthrough pace. But the practices aren't much more than walkthroughs anyway. As I understand it, if he's out there, even if he's doing a walkthrough, he's no longer eligible for PUP, right? I mean, I would think, you could be out there standing around with your coach like we saw, but it sounds like he participated in a walkthrough pace, which to me means he practiced. So I think that takes him out of PUP eligibility.
I don't know that, actually. I'll have to look that up because it's a voluntary practice.
I think as long as you practice. But anyway, it looks encouraging. I mean, he was jogging around, like when the O-line would jog from one place to another, he was jogging down with them and he was moving around. He's about 5 months out from ACL in the SEC championship game. So I'm still you can hold your breath until he can prove that he can stay healthy, but it was good that he was out there. They spent a lot of time on stretching and agility stuff, more than I think they did under Doug. They were out there for a while, and that was most of the time we were out there. They were stretching, and they were doing some new stretches that we hadn't seen. I mean, this happens, new coach. But that's one thing that can help cut down injuries is agility and stretching and the soft tissue injuries. So we'll see how. I mean, some stuff are just unavoidable, but
I do wonder about the structure of practices because it does change from coach to coach.
Yeah.
But I wonder if we'll see more carryover this time because Frank was here under Doug, and he probably brought a lot of that to Indy, and then Nick was under Frank. So I wonder if a lot of it's going to be the same. We know we'll never see a change like we did in 2013 when they went from Andy to Chip, which was insane.
Those first Chip practices were a trip, man. It was breathtaking watching how fast they were moving and everything. It ran its course, but it was fun. And those guys holding up those signs and everything, and guys are sprinting on and off the field. And that was cool. But Devontae looks really skinny, and we knew that, but just kind of seeing him up close from a few feet away, it's really striking just how not just small, but just skinny. I mean, he's got those, Todd Pinkston legs, but we knew that. It doesn't change my mind about the player, certainly. There wasn't much else. I was watching Jamie Newman a little bit. He's the only quarterback who's at rookie practice. There wasn't a lot of time to really. I think we were out there for about 20, 25 minutes, just under. But the ball seemed to be going where he wanted it to go when he was tossing it around in different drills. He's going to be an interesting guy. He certainly looks the part. 6'3", he's a big dude. It'd be interesting to watch. I still think he's probably earmarked for the practice squad, but with only 3 QBs on the roster, it's possible that I looked it up. The last undrafted rookie quarterback to make the Eagles out of camp was Brad Gable in 91. Ended up starting a couple games with all the injuries. I thought Tim Hasselbeck did, but he had been an undrafted. He had been in a camp the year before, so it was his first year, but he wasn't technically a rookie. But that doesn't happen. So, but he's an interesting guy. Trayvon Grimes is another guy and we talked to him on I guess on Friday morning. Big dude, man. He's got a big afro, so he looks about 6'7", and I think what's that from Fletch? There's another movie reference, but yeah, he's interesting. I think he's going to be a guy that a lot of people will keep their eye on in training camp. Wide receiver from Florida. He started out at Ohio State and he left because he wasn't getting a chance to play because they had so much talent. And he goes to Florida, and all of a sudden he's around. Kadarius Toney and Kyle Pitts and doesn't get the ball that much, but his production was decent considering he was about the third option at best. So he's got good size. He can run pretty good, and he's going to be an interesting guy. They've got some young talent at wide receiver, and it's going to be interesting to see how it all sorts itself out. Because there's not a lot of locks once you get past Devontae and Rager.
Yeah, and I think Grimes is probably a likely candidate to be the training camp darling this year because he has the frame and the ability to make some kind of fun, spectacular catches. And I could see him doing that in camp. And that'd be a lot of fun.
Favorite training camp darling?
Paul Turner.
Paul Turner's a good one, but then he had that game in Cincinnati. We'll always have the Paul Turner game. That's all you have to say is the Paul Turner game.
Yeah.
It beats the Zach Ertz out of bounds game, but I shouldn't even mention that.
Who's your favorite?
Probably Henry Josie. Is that his name? Henry Josie. Yeah. Hank Baskett was a good one. He ended up making the team and making some big plays, but that was 2005, and no, it was 2006. Right? It was his rookie year because T.O. was gone, so everybody was at training camp at Lehigh was doing like basket. They were doing the T.O. thing, but saying basket. So that was fun. Yeah, he was incredible. That was the greatest training camp I've ever seen. But I got to go Henry Josie, man. That guy was unstoppable.
Yeah, it is fun though watching those guys become fan favorites out of nowhere.
It's fun, but it's sad because they're never going to make a team for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, a few have here and there, and some of them made big plays here and there. I mean, that Paul Turner game was a big game for him. DeAndre
down 50-0.
Yeah, DeAndre Carter made some plays. He's still in the league.
Yeah. I don't think he was a training camp darling, and we don't really have that anymore since we're not at Lehigh. I mean, there's a few fans there, but they're just standing around. They're not even paying attention. It's a shame because that's when the training camp darlings really like at Westchester or Lehigh. You'd have all these fans and like a guy would make a diving catch and it was over. He was the darling for the rest of the camp.
Yeah. And now it's like I feel responsible for creating the darlings because we're doing practice observations and so-and-so had a spectacular catch.
Not quite the same.
No, it's not.
And we don't have video of it because we're not allowed to shoot past warm-ups. It's a shame.
Yeah. Anything else from rookie camp before we move on?
No, I don't think so. It was good. It was good to see. We were kind of watching Nick, and he looked a lot more comfortable running practice than doing a press conference. As expected. He's very, very energetic, running from group to group. He spent a lot of time with the receivers. Just a lot of energy, a lot of hands-on stuff. We saw him working with Devontae, doing some technique stuff. Right from the get-go. So different world, man. It's crazy how a few years ago this team wins a Super Bowl and you're sitting here watching practice and there's nobody left from that team, like 5 guys. And I mean, obviously, rookie camp, you're not gonna have them there anyway. But just the change, the new coach, new staff, it's a lot of energy. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, and Sirianni has to put in thought about how he's going to handle practices because he's always been an offensive guy, and I think that takes some getting used to. I mean, we're talking to Doug about that, and really any coach because they're coming from one side of the ball and now they're in charge of the entire group. So how do they split up their time during a practice? Are they going from position to position? Is Sirianni mostly going to stay with the offense? Is he going to go to the defense at times? And it's something he has to figure out.
And he talked about that a little bit Friday. And he said, I have to make sure I don't shortchange the defense. And he says he's actually looking forward to being over there and to making that part of his routine.
Yeah. Corey Clement has a new team. He signs with the Giants. I'm happy for him that he got a job because I don't think that was a guarantee. He's a guy that you and I both like a lot, and he's not old. He's still a young man, but running backs fall off cliffs and he's had the injuries. What do you think? I mean, do you think he can make that team and still play?
Well, they don't have a lot of depth at all at running back. So I think they signed the dude from the Raiders, whose name escapes me, but there's other than Saquon, he looks like he's healthy and he's going to be okay. But I think the thing Corey has going for him is he's a really good special teamer, but the injuries are a concern because he hasn't been able to stay healthy. I think it's one of the stranger careers we've ever seen. I mean, that Super Bowl, people like in 20 years are going to be reading about the Super Bowl and see that some backup undrafted rookie running back had a 55-yard catch and run to set up a pass from the backup tight end to the quarterback just before halftime, and then had a spectacular catch in triple coverage in the back of the end zone. It was ruled no catch and then reversed. I mean, people are going to read about 4 for 100 and that he could have been the MVP. He was in the running. And what happened to this guy? I mean, he hasn't really done much since. Didn't play at all in 19, barely played last year. So I don't know. I think he'll make the team. How much he has left, how his ability to stay healthy, what he can contribute as an offensive player. I really thought after the Super Bowl, I thought this is a guy who is a real valuable backup because he can catch, he can run, he can play special teams, he can block. He's a real team guy. He's unselfish, but he just couldn't stay healthy here. So hopefully he can stay healthy and contribute. He always was good against the Giants. I mean, he's like Boston Scott. I mean, he's got more rushing yards, catches, touchdowns, everything against the Giants than anybody else. So Boston wasn't available. So I guess it made sense. But yeah, good guy, South Jersey guy, Glassboro. I used to live in Glassboro. And he's not the only Glassboro High School graduate in the NFL, right? Juwan Jones, I believe, just signed with Jacksonville, maybe.
Did he?
Yeah. Juwan Jones was state Group 1 champ in the 100, by the way. I know you're going to ask about that.
If you want, Raquel Armstead just got released too.
I saw that at Millville.
Yeah.
Another
you have a track stat for me on Raquel.
Well, yeah, he was a heck of an athlete in a lot of events. He long jumped. He ran the 100. Yeah, hopefully, I think he was hurt last year. Hopefully, he gets a shot. Good kid. Temple, right?
Yeah. He apparently had COVID and then had some lingering effects, and so yeah, I hope he gets another shot. Corey Clement off the market. There are some Eagles from the 2020 team who are still available. We want to kind of go through the list here, and we'll figure out first if they're going to be in the NFL in 2021, and if the Eagles could find a use for them.
Yeah, we'll go through these kind of quick. Deontay Burnett, wide receiver. He's going into his 4th year. He's only 23. It's just that teams, there's so many young, fast receivers coming into the league every year that a guy like Deontay Burnett, it's tough to find a camp to get into. He's got 15 catches in 3 seasons. So I like the kid. I think he's a smart kid. He's got good hands, but he's small, and he's a guy that just might not get another job.
Yeah, last training camp, he was so good. And if he couldn't make a team after that, I don't know how he's going to make a team. And he stuck around. He was on the practice squad. They brought him up at least once or twice, and he had maybe a few catches. But I, I, if he couldn't do it last year, it's hard for me to imagine him going somewhere and having a better camp than he did. He had such a good camp last year. He did everything he could to make the team last year.
Yeah, you're right. Next guy is Blake Countess, who's had, I guess, 3 different stints with the Eagles, 2 recently and 1 back in 16. I think they drafted him in the 6th round.
Yeah.
He's another one. I think if he hasn't done it yet, and I mean, he's not really a defensive back. I don't know if he's a good enough special teamer to get a job. I would think he'd have one by now. And he's 28, 29, turns 28 in a few weeks. So he's another one who maybe he gets into a camp, but I just don't see him being on a team at this point.
He has had a kind of a strange career because he was a Howie favorite in 2016. Howie loved Blake Countess, and they cut him. And after that, we all kind of figured he would end up on the practice squad, but he didn't. He ended up out in LA on the Rams practice squad, and he worked his way up, and he was a solid contributor for them on special teams and a little bit on defense over the next few seasons. Comes back here, leaves, and he's just never stuck here. And the one
Remember how excited everyone was when they signed him?
Yeah. I mean, because he had played a little bit and he had played for a good team. Those Rams teams were good. So you thought maybe he has a little bit left to give, and he just didn't work out here. The one weird thing I remember about Blake Countess was in his rookie year during training camp, the Eagles were toying or playing with those cameras, like the video cameras on the helmets, and he was the first guy to have one. And it ended up like they got like Blair Witch Project video out of them, and they never used them again because it was unusable stuff. It was just like every little head twitch, the camera was shaking. They were getting like sick trying to watch them. But he was the first guy to wear one of those. Interesting.
Next guy has one claim to fame, but it's not going to help him get a job, and that's Trayvon Hester, the D tackle. Blocked Cody Parkey's field goal attempt in Chicago in the playoffs, the last playoff game the Eagles won in 2018. But he's going to be 20. He's going to be 29 this summer, and he's bounced around. He's been with the Raiders, the Packers. He's been with a bunch of teams. He's been here like 5 different times. At some point, either you can do it or you can't do it. And he played a lot as a rookie in Oakland, but I don't know. I think he's one of those guys who's going to have a hard time getting into a camp as well.
I think he'll end up on a team.
Do you really? On a team,
yeah.
Like on a roster?
No, with a team, I should say.
Okay. Yeah, we'll see. He's got experience of teams looking for a depth.
He's not bad.
What's
the
that?
Eagles he's not bad. The Eagles just have so much depth at defensive tackle. They have no use for him, which is a shame when one of the teams that you have familiarity with no longer needs you, and your defensive coordinator there isn't in the league. That makes it tough. Well, he's in the league, but he's not a coordinator in the league.
Right. The next guy is Crayvon LeBlanc. He's one guy, at one point I thought maybe they would bring him back, but it's a new staff. They don't know Cray. Howie does, but and he's had trouble staying healthy as well. I don't think he's a bad player in the slot, but we'll see. I think he'll be somewhere. I think he'll be in a camp, and I think he'll end up on a roster at some point, but it might take a while to get there. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I like him as a player. He's a tough inside corner. He's a nickel. That's what he is, but that's fine. I actually think the Eagles could use him. I don't know, but you also think if they're going to sign him, they'd probably do it by now, right?
Well, maybe they're trying to sign someone else. I think he would be a cheap option if they can't. Maybe
they'll wait to see how Zach McPherson looks.
Yeah, something like that. It could be, but I think Cray will. And again, his problem is that the way he plays the game. He's so physical. He's a really good tackler. He loves to play the run. He just takes a beating. He's not a big guy, and I mean, he's strong. He's built, but he's just, not big. He's just going to keep getting hurt. So that's the risk. But man, he had that interception on Breeze to open that playoff game. That was incredible. I thought they were going to win that game at that point, and when it was 14-0 as well. Josh Perkins is next. What do you think about Perk's chances?
Yeah, not great. He's dealt with some injuries. He's more of a obviously receiving tight end. He's not a blocker. He's kind of a converted receiver. I don't see it.
17 catches in 3 seasons. Had that touchdown against the Giants. That crazy play across the field. But I think he might have a hard time. The next guy is Jason Peters. And I hope he comes to terms with the fact that it's over. I think it would be sad to see him. And I think teams that look at film of Jason Peters from last year are not going to be in a rush to sign him, especially if he's looking for more than minimum, which I would think he would be. I hope he just kind of reads the tea leaves and say, you know what, it's been a great run. It's time. It's time to shut it down.
He wants to play,
He does.
and if a team is in camp and they get desperate, someone gets hurt, maybe he ends up on a team.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't think
he wants to play. He wants to play.
I know. Well, I wonder why.
He just likes playing.
I think he's very good anymore.
He doesn't think that.
It's hard to watch him. How can he not know? I mean, why doesn't somebody tell him? I guess they're afraid.
Well, I'd be afraid too. But he did. I mean, he was hurt last year, which is another part of it. I mean, it's not like he's all of a sudden not going to get hurt, but he did have that toe injury. It was a serious injury, and that I'm not making excuses for the way he played last year, but that can affect you.
What are the odds he could stay healthy, though?
Not great, probably. Yeah, I mean, I don't think at his age, it's all of a sudden he's going to stay healthy, but that's probably the way he's looking at it. It's like, I was hurt last year. I had a toe injury. I couldn't do what I normally do.
2 more guys. Nikel Roby-Coleman, 29-year-old slot, looking for his 4th team in 6 years. Didn't play well last year. Maybe he gets into a camp, show what he can do, but I think the odds are working against him.
Yeah, I was disappointed in him last year. I really thought that was a good signing. I thought he would make a big difference, and he didn't.
And the last guy on the list is Richard Rodgers, who I think will be in the league. I'm a big Richard Rodgers guy. He caught like 24 balls last year when Ertz was hurt. He's not a blocker, but he's got great hands. He's experienced. He's caught like 150 passes in his career. So I think he's a guy that if a team needs a tight end and doesn't want to give up a 3rd-round pick for Zach Ertz or pay someone $8 million, Richard Rodgers is a good option as a backup tight end. I think he'll get a job. I would think
he's a good option here. I mean, if he wants to come back, and if Ertz isn't here, then all of a sudden that tight end room is really light. If Ertz isn't here, you have Dallas Goedert, and then you have Caleb Wilson and Jason Kroom and Hakeem Butler. So, yeah, bringing back Richard Rodgers would make sense in that situation. Of all the guys in the list, I think Richard Rodgers and Cre'Von LeBlanc are the 2 that I think there should be some interest from the Eagles.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would be surprised if Richard Rodgers isn't eventually here. I'll go that far.
Yeah, I mean, I did my 53-man projection. I had him here, so we'll see.
Oh, good. And just to run down the guys that have signed, Corey Clement, as you said, with the Giants, Vinny Curry, Jets, Rudy Ford, Jaguars, Nate Gary, and Nate Sudfeld, 49ers, Deshaun, Raiders, Malik Jackson, Browns, Jalen Mills, Patriots, and Duke Riley, Dolphins. And then Jordan Howard and Hassan Ridgeway re-signed here.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Couldn't believe Rudy Ford was like a day 1 signing for.
The market was hot for Rudy.
Unbelievable. All right. You got anything else before we wrap this up?
No, beautiful week, beautiful weather. Everybody get outside and do something outside. Go to the park, go fishing, hunting, whatever you do. Go for a jog.
Yeah.
Nice week.
Yeah, absolutely. A beautiful weather week. If you enjoy the Eagle Eye podcast, please do us a favor. Rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. We want to thank JP Finlay from NBC Sports Washington. We appreciate
JP
him.
Finlay.
Finlay. We appreciate his time. For Rube, I'm Dave. We'll talk to you guys soon.